Okay, in this video I'm gonna rank every single member of the nWo on a scale from 1 to 10. Now these rankings are gonna be based on the skills and career of each wrestler while they were in the faction, and I also want to focus on how well they fit in the group, what they contributed to it, and how the faction affected their persona. So this isn't an overall score reflecting each wrestler's entire career, so don't freak out on me. I mean, I can see the comments already. Anyway, let's get this one started. I want to start out by saying it shouldn't come to a surprise that all three founding members are going to be 10s for me, so I won't spend too much time on them individually. Hall had the wrestling world on fire with his debut and would go on to create some of the most memorable catchphrases in the group. And while he didn't reach the same main event status that Hogan and Nash did, his impact on the stable cannot be understated. Nash would make his mark as well, even going as far as starting his own spin-off of the nWo in the Red and Black Wolfpack. And boy, if you were a teenager like me at the time, these guys were seriously the coolest freaking thing on Nitro. He would also go on to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship while defeating Goldberg's winning streak at the same time. So yeah, it's safe to say he made an impact during his time in the nWo. And then of course there is the infamous Third Man. But whose side is he on? The Hogan heel turn was truly iconic and changed the way many of us viewed wrestling. The leader of the New World Order made being the bad guy a cool thing, and the nWo helped contribute to what would be a brand new chapter in his career that would span another few decades. Pretty incredible stuff. So with these guys as obvious 10s, we can move on to the rest. And this is going to be a big group of wrestlers, so buckle up and sit tight. This one had huge potential but just didn't pan out in my opinion. When Ted Dibiase was revealed as the fourth member of the nWo, it was looking like he was going to be the money and the voice behind the group of delinquents, but shortly thereafter he just kind of made appearances off to the side most of the time. I wonder why his role changed so much. Other than the occasional heelish manager activities, he became very non-existent and prematurely left the group, where he then managed the Steiners before quietly disappearing from television to pursue a backstage role with the company. Because of this lackluster role in the group, I have to give Ted the low score of a 4, because while he certainly fit in the group, they just didn't utilize him as a manager or the spokesperson for that brand. Sorry Ted, it's really not your fault. Good old Paul White, the guy they tried to pawn off on us as the son of Andre. Had this guy been around 10 to 15 years earlier, he'd be the biggest thing in wrestling. Freakish size, plus wicked agility, and decent-ish mic skills, he had a lot to offer. But maybe not so much in the nWo. He was the first member of the group to never have wrestled for the WWF, and right off the bat, it just didn't really seem like a cohesive fit. It's also safe to say that he had more success before joining the nWo, as he was booted from the main event scene in favor for the mid-card, so the group didn't really do him many favors in that respect. His on and off again relationship with the stable made things even less engaging in the long run, and ultimately led to his dissatisfaction with the role in the promotion, leading to his departure to the WWF, where just a few years later he would rejoin the nWo. And that felt even more out of place for some reason. Let's be honest, in the grand scheme of things, they probably could have done something better with the Giant, but he still made some sort of an impact, so I gotta give him a 7 out of 10 here. So I'm aware that the fake Sting, or nWo Sting, actually had some popularity in Japan. Okay, more than some. He was more over than the real Sting over there, but we're here to talk about what was happening on WCW programming in the good old US of A. Jeff Farmar was brought in to play the part of a Sting imposter, initially attempting to fool the audience into thinking the Stinger had joined forces with the nWo, but more importantly, to cause turmoil within the WCW locker room. At first it was actually quite entertaining, but not long after, everybody became well aware that this Sting was not authentic, and so the angle became stale rather quickly. A fake Sting, good idea for a quick storyline, not so good for the long term. I'm gonna rank him a 5. That's being kind of generous, too. Love him or hate him, and I know many of you hate him, Syxx was an important member of the nWo in my opinion. I mean, this was a heel faction after all, and it seemed that Nash, Hogan, and Hall were getting more cheers than boos, but Sean Waltman just drew the heat. I mean, people loved to hate this guy. His real-life friendship with the Outsiders translated well on screen as the group known as the Wolfpack. Yes, before the actual Red and Black Wolfpack. Syxx would also be the only member of the group to compete in the Cruiserweight division and offered up some much-needed variety in the sea of big men. His time as an nWo member also opened up a new, edgier persona for Waltman, not previously seen in the WWF, that would later transition over seamlessly as a member of the faction D-Generation X. Even though Syxx was mainly only with WCW for a little over a year, his entire run there was spent with the nWo, and during this time we saw some pretty memorable matches, moments, and promos. He would return as a member of WWE's version of the nWo, and arguably with even more heat than he had before, but his best time with the Black and White was definitely during his first run, and overall, I'm gonna give Waltman an 8. Kyle Petty. Say what? Okay, technically, he wasn't a wrestler or a manager or even an on-screen personality, but he did technically join the nWo and drove a badass nWo car. Okay, so maybe it was only a handful of times, but damn it, it was out there. I don't even really know how to rank this one. I mean, it's definitely cool to see the cross promotion and to see the nWo getting some love, but it was rather short-lived and didn't do much for either side. I'll give it a 3 just based on creativity. Can it get worse than a 3? Oh yes, it definitely can. This poor guy went from facing Bret Hart for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship in 1992 to being crowned as the nWo's head of security. What does that even mean? Well, you follow the mid-card members of the group down to the ring, walk around the ring during their match, and occasionally get beat up by somebody from the WCW roster, but not actually participate in matches. I mean, sure, there were a few over the course of a couple years, but, like, what the hell? The craziest part is he was one of the last members of the group before it quietly disappeared in mid-1999. How the hell did he last so long? I just can't find anything redeeming from his time with the stable. Nothing at all, so it's a 1. The group needed some female representation, and what we ended up getting was Miss Elizabeth. Initially, her inclusion to the group came with hesitation as she still had feelings for Randy Savage, but ultimately the two would reunite in the faction. It was during this time that I feel Liz was best utilized, especially since the oil and water pairing of Macho and Liz just always worked. But later on, Savage would end up in the Wolfpack while Liz represented the Black and White, and there just wasn't much happening with her, and maybe this is just me, but she was too nice. Like, I mean, this is a mega heel group, and look at her. She's just so nice. Not the best fit, in my opinion, without Macho Man, but I still give her run a 6. I don't think we can count this. I mean, can we count this? The Nasty Boys are listed as former nWo members, but I mean, really? No, we can't. What better way to add to a heel group's heat than to pay off an official? Nick Patrick would be that man. Not only would he throw matches the nWo's way, but he would even change up his look, often sporting the stable's colors, sunglasses, and a set of earrings. Paired with the mullet, it's safe to say this dude had some tood. While the idea was great, it did lead to some strange moments, and was used a little too much at times, taking away from the impact of this angle. It should be obvious that Patrick wasn't a necessary member by any means, but as a helping hand on the official side, I'll give him a 4. It's funny, looking back I seem to remember Bischoff joining a lot sooner than he did, but when he did, oh boy. Now you've got a WCW executive calling the nWo shots. I mean, it's about to go down. This role paved the way for Eric's on-screen career because, in all honesty, had this not happened, I don't think we would have ever seen him in WWE as an on-screen talent. He really didn't offer much before his heel turn other than some basic commentary and a sort of generic presence, but when Eazy-E was born, something special happened in the industry. He became a pivotal part of the nWo, setting up crazy stipulations, firing WCW talent, and making the lives of the opposition hell during his reign as WCW Vice President. Eric Bischoff made the nWo, but it's also safe to say the nWo made Eric Bischoff. This one, it's a 9. He's buff, he's tough, and he rocks a top hat and stuff. Bagwell has always been one of those nWo members that just fit into the mix so well, in my opinion. I loved his hyper personality, his arrogant poses, all that close and personal time with every camera he can find, and the airbrushed gear. I wish wrestlers would bring that look back. I even really enjoyed his tag team stint with Scott Norton as Vicious and Delicious. Classic odd couple stuff there. He had already developed a name for himself in WCW as one half of the American Males tag team, but this was the necessary next step in the evolution of Bagwell. Would it surprise anybody to hear that during his decade-long run in WCW, Buff never won a singles championship? I mean, not one. Sure, he was a 5-time tag champion, but not even the TV title. Regardless, he still had a solid presence in the mid-card and maintained a strong following after his nWo days. I'll give Buff's run a 7. Oh man, why do I have to do this one? Mike Rotunda. You probably know him best as Irwin R. Shyster, or IRS in the WWF. But in WCW, he had a run as Michael Wall Street, and then VK Wall Street. Oh yeah, and then Michael Wall Street once again. This is about the time he was offered an nWo membership by his old buddy Ted Dibiase. During his time in the group, he did just about nothing. Barely wrestled, barely appeared with the group, he was just kind of invisible. Luckily, he wouldn't last long in the faction, but I still can't find a single reason he should have been there. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but come on, this one's a 1. Well, this one isn't much better. The former Big Boss Man just got a series of bad breaks in WCW. He was the Boss, the Guardian Angel, and of course Big Bubba Rogers. He joined the Dungeon of Doom, then turned his back on them and joined the nWo, leaving little impact on either group. His stay was also quite short, most likely by design, as just about anybody could see this was a poor fit. He would hang around in WCW until 1998, at which point he made a return to the WWF as the Big Boss Man and had a better run as the head of security for the corporation, in my opinion. Guys, kind of want to say 1 here, but I'm going to give him a 2 just because I really enjoyed both of his WWF runs. When I was a kid, I often mistakenly referred to this next wrestler as Scott Gordon. He just looks like a Gordon. The Flash had tried his hand with WCW in 1993, but it just wasn't his time. After a run in Japan and a failed attempt to join the WWF, Norton would wind up back in WCW in 1995, but they didn't really know what to do with him. After a tag team run with Ice Train, known as Fire and Ice, Scott would find himself a member of the nWo. Teaming with Buff Bagwell, he was on a decent road to mediocrity, in the US that is. Back in Japan, he won the IWGP Heavyweight title and even brought the belt back to an episode of Nitro where his title reign was mentioned only once in the 4 solid months he held that title. As his presence in Japan continued to grow as a main eventer, his job back in the States as the king of the B-Team was quite the contrast. This led to the eventual departure of the big man in 1999 to pursue a permanent career in Japan. I feel like Norton could have been a much bigger name in the nWo, but I guess there were just too many big fish in a small pond. It's a 6. I want to start off by saying I enjoyed Savage's run in the original nWo, but having said that, I'll say that I also feel it wasn't really needed for either side. With Hogan and Savage both there now, it started to feel overinflated, and that feeling even carried over to the storyline as the two feuded and ultimately led to the creation of the nWo Wolfpack, which Savage would become a part of. I think Macho fit in better with that group, and even though it didn't really do much for his career, I enjoyed the run he had in the red and black. Looking back, I would have preferred to see Macho stay a member of the WCW roster and continue to feud with Hogan, but it is what it is, and for what it was, I'll give Savage's run in the nWo overall a 7. Not gonna lie here, as a big basketball fan in the 90s, especially the Bulls, this was pretty damn epic. Rodman was the bad boy of the NBA, a real-life heel, and he fit into the group like few other celebrities at the time could. When Dennis Rodman joined the nWo, I didn't realize he would actually get into the ring and wrestle, and while he wasn't great by any means, I can still remember being rather impressed that he was doing what he was doing. Looking back now, I think he would have been better suited as a heelish valet of sorts instead of stepping into the ring, but this was still cross-promotion at its finest, and they couldn't have picked a better celebrity to fill the role. I'm gonna give it a 6. This one is like a tale of two Conans. Black and white member Conan was sort of in the background, but definitely had potential. This potential would become realized when he joined the nWo Red and Black Wolfpack. His mic time would increase, his matches got better, and his chemistry with the other Wolfpack members just felt so sincere. Some of his most known catchphrases and moves would be born during this time, and I'm sure most WCW fans from this era remember this version of Conan the most. If I had to rate him on his time in the black and white, it wouldn't be that great, but including his time in the red and black, I'll have to give K-Dog a solid 8. As much as I love me some Curt Wennig, I just never saw this one as a fit. His WCW debut had so much potential, there was so much they could have done with him, but the predictable move was to stick him in the nWo, and that's exactly what they did. His run in the group was pretty forgettable, and he would eventually wind up in the Wolfpack for a cup of coffee, followed by the nWo B team. Yikes. The nWo didn't do much for Curt's career, and in fact it would be after this run that he would go on to the now classic West Texas Rednecks angle, which is arguably his best work during this WCW run. It just wasn't the best fit or the best time, and I'll give this one a 5. By now, many of you know that Rick Rude appeared on both WWF Raw and WCW Nitro on the same night. Wow. On one show, a member of D-Generation X, and on the other, a member of the New World Order. Rude would manage real-life friend Curt Wennig in the faction, but his time with the group was cut extremely short due to an injury and illness. It's a shame that this one didn't pan out. I feel that had Rude showed up earlier as a manager, he would have had a great impact. But it felt like the pairing of Rude and Wennig got lost in the shuffle, so I gotta give this one a 4. Louie Spicolli signed with WCW in 1997, quickly joining the nWo as what would be best described as a lackey to Scott Hall. His feud that was building with Larry Zbyszko was something that would become a little bit controversial after Spicolli's death, as Zbyszko would kind of stay in kayfabe and refuse to comment on Spicolli's death on an episode of Nitro. His time was cut short, and it's interesting to see what could have been, as he was said to have a ton of potential, but we never got to see that, and ranking him strictly as an nWo member, I'd have to give him a 3. Yes, the American Dream was even a part of the New World Order at one point. In 1998, Rhodes would turn his back on WCW to join up with the Black and White, where he would provide managerial duties to the Outsiders. This partnership would only last a few months, and during this time there wasn't much impact on either the faction or Rhodes as an individual. The initial swerve was entertaining, but that's about all this one was good for. I'll have to give Rhodes a 4 as a member of the nWo. Bryan Adams had all sorts of roles in the WWF. He was Crush, a member of the Nation, and even a cool biker dude. But when he hit WCW, he was just Bryan Adams. His debut saw him attack Bret Hart, revealing himself to be the newest member of the nWo, and things were actually off to a good start for Adams. He even got a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship against Goldberg on an episode of Nitro. But after that, he would quickly descend into the deep, dark abyss that is the nWo B team. He would eventually spend some time as the Kiss Demon before ultimately becoming one half of the tag team Chronic, which was probably his best gig since his days as Crush. But his time in the nWo was really disappointing, so I'm giving him a 5. When Scott Steiner turned his back on Brother Rick to join the nWo, it looked like just another addition to the rapidly expanding faction, but little did the wrestling world realize that a superstar was in the making. Not only would Scott change up his look, but also his attitude, becoming even more angry, aggressive, and unpredictable. Big Papa Pump was born and would become one of the few breakout stars that truly developed during their time in the nWo. He would remain a member of the heel stable until it folded in 1999 and would even return for the angle that was nWo 2000. He would maintain as one of WCW's top heels and one of the most feared men on the roster inside and outside of the squared circle. Because of his contributions to the group and what this pairing did for his career, Scott Steiner as an nWo member is a 10. All day, every day. Holler if you hear me. From one extreme to another, Ed Leslie, real-life personal friend of Hulk Hogan, attempted to join the nWo in 1996, but the group rejected him, and he left WCW shortly after. He would return in 1998 as the Disciple, the new bodyguard of Hollywood Hogan. And that was pretty much the extent of his services. Hang around Hogan during his promos, stand around during matches, and occasionally attack the opposition. He didn't really hurt the group, but he also didn't do much of anything to contribute, and before you knew it, he was gone. And I'll give him a 2. Here's another guy that I sort of wish just would have never joined the nWo. I mean, I loved the Wolfpack, but Lex Luger always felt like the odd man out in this group. I mean, it was bad enough that Randy Savage was coming out to rap music, but to be fair, he did have a cool factor to him and would become a rapper himself, I guess. But Luger, I mean, come on, Luger just wasn't cool. I don't know, it didn't do either side's much good, to be honest, in my opinion, but maybe I'm in the minority there. He did manage to win his 5th US title while in the red and black, but other than that, there wasn't a whole lot going on with him. I'm gonna give him a 6. That of course brings us to the Stinger, who was brought into the Wolfpack by his friend Luger, so I guess that's something else Luger contributed to the stable. But as cool as that was to see Sting join the anti-nWo nWo, it also felt a little weird. I think Sting would lend more credibility to the group than the group would to him. I mean, he really didn't need the nWo. He was the ultimate lone hero, but with other big names like Macho, Luger, and Nash, the Wolfpack proved that quality could trump quantity. I mean, they just had big names. I'll give them a 7. When Harlem Heat split, there was hope that the two brothers could each have thriving singles careers. Well, one of them did. Stevie would initially seem like a good addition to the group, but would eventually fall victim to the B-Team blues, often accompanied by the likes of Vincent and Horace Hogan. In mid-1999, Stevie Ray would land the role as the leader of nWo Hollywood, the new name given to the B-Team, but the entire stable would disappear only a few months later. I really would have rather seen Stevie Ray do pretty much anything else with his singles run, because this was just such a big step backwards from Harlem Heat. I'll have to give him a 3, maybe a 4. I don't even know. It's not good. And from not good, we go to really not good. Michael Balea, aka Horace Hogan, is the real-life nephew of Terry Balea, aka Hulk Hogan. In a bizarre angle involving some strange family feud, Horace would join his uncle's nWo group, where he would quickly sink into the underbelly of the B-Team, tagging with the likes of Vincent, Stevie Ray, and Bryan Adams on episodes of Thunder. Now, to be fair, he did come close to grabbing a tag team championship against the Horsemen, but nothing else really happened for Horace during his nWo stint. Or afterwards, even. He's gonna be a 2. I almost gave him a 1, but he was at least involved in one somewhat decent angle, so I'll give him a 2. This is one that I can remember everybody pooping on when it happened. Disco Inferno and the Wolfpack? Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I guess there were worse guys on the list, but the whole way it went down with him kind of in the group, but not officially. They were kind of just using him or teasing him. I don't know, it was confusing. But Disco has stated that the entire NWO angle and working with Scott Hall was the highlight of his career, so that's pretty damn cool. I'll give him a 5. Can I just give my score here and move on? It's a 1. He made Wall Street look like a superstar. I'm also going to lump Tori in here as well because it was like a package deal, and nothing against Tori, but you know, I mean, this. When Bret Hart made the jump to WCW in late 1997, it was teased that he would join the nWo, but in fact he would become an associate of the group and not an official member. This is until the nWo 2000 was formed. Unfortunately, Bret was plagued by the injury that would ultimately end his career, so his time in the group was mostly spent on the mic or taking part in the occasional beatdown. But I do like the idea of Hart joining the nWo 2000 over the original group back in '98. In fact, I wish they wouldn't have even had him associated with that group. He came in red hot and should have been thrusted into the main event right away, feuding with the nWo, but hindsight is 2020. I think if he was healthy during this time, this run could have been pretty solid, but due to the limitations, it's a 6 for me. Well, I guess if you're going to have an nWo group, you've got to have somebody the fans really love to hate. He's kind of like the nWo 2000's version of Six in a way. He went into the group with the US title. In fact, all 4 of the original members of this reincarnation held gold at the beginning, which is pretty impressive. Ultimately, Double J would lose the title and eventually the group disbanded, but he would later go on to win the World Heavyweight Championship. This version of the group doesn't hold a lot of significance in the history behind the New World Order, but for what it was, and it pains me to say this because I'm not the biggest Jarrett fan, he sort of fit into it. But then again, it was the nWo 2000, so that's probably not saying much. I'd give him a 6 though, considering all the circumstances. Okay, no disrespect, but I'm gonna lump this next group of people all together because, well, it was the nWo 2000. They were there for a cup of coffee, and honestly, they didn't contribute much of anything. Madeja, Tylene Buck, April Hunter, and Pamela Paulshock, for their services, whatever the hell they were, get a combined score of a 1. These 2 guys were the nWo 2000's equivalent to Vincent and the Disciple. Seriously, they were just security for the stable. I mean, they wrestled matches and all, but were they good ones? No, seriously, were they? I mean, I can't remember a single one. I'm really not trying to be a dick here, but I guess I was just so frustrated with WCW during this time, as they took a company and a product that I loved and just drove it into the ground. And guys like this were collateral damage. It's a 1. It's funny to think that both members of Harlem Heat were in the nWo at 2 completely different times in 2 completely different promotions. Booker T fit into the nWo about as well as, well, he didn't fit well. It was weird. Booker T had too much potential at the time to be slowed down by a faction and just didn't have chemistry with the other members. Except for that time he was singing a modified version of HBK's theme to X-Pac. That's still one of my favorite moments in the history of WWE, but other than that, it just felt odd, and I think Creative felt it too because Booker T was super kicked right out of the group after only a short stint. Neither side benefited from this one, but hey, we'll always have that song, and for that, I'll give him a 3. And last but not least, we have Shawn Michaels. This was another weird one, but what wasn't weird about WWE's version of the nWo? Now at least there was some excitement in the fact that Michaels had been gone from WWE for the past 18 months, but one can also argue that him returning as a member of the nWo kind of took away from his return overall. But regardless, it didn't really matter because the whole thing would be blown up almost instantly, with Vince McMahon himself pretty much demanding that we forget that any of it ever happened. To this day, HBK is the only nWo member to never have worked for WCW, which is a pretty cool fact. Shawn Michaels as a member of the nWo? Yeah, it's in the middle of the road for me. It's a 5. So that's it. That's my take on each and every nWo member. Again, this list doesn't reflect the entire careers of these individuals. Instead, their time with the group, their impact on the group, and the group's impact on them. If you enjoyed the video, why don't you stick around, hit that subscribe button, and I'll have some more inconsistent content for you. Hey, I do what I can, you know? Until then, I'll catch you guys on the B team.